It's time now for On Point, where we speak to various experts to dig deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. As widely expected, Tuesday, South Korea's central bank froze the benchmark interest rate at 0.75%, but left strong hints that it might be hiked next month in a bid to tackle the inflation we just heard about in that previous report. The Bank of Korea raised the rate by a quarter percentage point from a record low of 0.5% in August, so we could be seeing a series of back-to-back rapid rate hikes.
Yes. Now, such a move would put extra pressure on families already saddled with a lot of household debt, an issue which has long been a thorn in the side of South Korea's economy. For a closer look, we connect to Steven Borowiec, a writer, journalist, and broadcaster based in Seoul. Thank you for joining us.
Right.
Now, Steven, we keep hearing the economy is recovering thanks to strong exports, but in day-to-day life, this have little bearing on most people, and many are struggling due to the virus restrictions, inflation, and dwindling spending. Do you think the BOK has the tools through its policies to help the regular person, and what impact would another rate hike so soon after the last have on heavily indebted households?
Well, any central bank or monetary policy is inherently kind of limited in what kind of short-term effect it can have on the real economy. For the households that you refer to who are struggling with, a lot of people have lost jobs or seen their incomes shrinking in other ways, this is not immediately helpful for them. And as you alluded to, for those households, and there are many who have taken out loans to perhaps purchase homes or make other investments, this increases the pressure on them. So I think what the Bank of Korea's decision really means over the long term is that they're trying to kind of look ahead and calm any sort of inflationary pressures that might come ahead in the future. But for those households that you refer to, this is not any kind of immediate assistance for them, and they will have to seek some other way towards a more sustainable achievement of growth and improvement of the real economy.
Right, and Stephen, as you touched upon, South Korea is dealing with this issue of high inflation. Billions upon billions of dollars have been pumped into this pandemic-hit economy, much like many other countries around the world. But this has had the all-too-predictable effect of causing prices to skyrocket, while a great many people's salaries, if they still have a job after this pandemic, for the most part remain flat. In your view, is it time for officials in South Korea to make a concrete decision whether to lift the virus restrictions to give small businesses a chance of getting through this, or just printing more money?
I think officials right now have to be carrying out some pretty rigorous cost-benefit analysis and trying to look at what really are the effects of these social distancing measures that we've been dealing with for, it's almost 2 years now. And I understand that policymakers, their big priority has been to stem the flow of the virus and to just keep people from getting sick and to try to keep a lid on the kind of psychological pressure that can come with a pandemic. But it seems to me at this time, with a fairly large percentage of the population having had at least one, if not two, vaccination shots, it seems to me like it would be prudent to very seriously consider lifting some of these measures. I mean, in the course of some of my reporting, I've been talking to the operators of small businesses like restaurants and retailers, and they really have been suffering for a very long time. These measures have made it hard for them to do much business, particularly restaurants and bars. If there's a cap on their operating hours at something like 9 p.m., it's almost not worth them opening. And they feel as though the effects of these social distancing measures have fallen disproportionately on them. I interviewed one owner of a restaurant last week, and he said, why is it that government officials still gather in large numbers at their offices, but we're not allowed to have a similar number of people in our establishments? So I do think that that's something that the government is looking very hard at, and all the indications are that we'll see some kind of a loosening in the next few weeks. And that's a move that I think many people will welcome.
Mm-hmm. Now, Stephen, let's turn to the market reaction to the BOK's rate freeze decision on Tuesday. South Korea's benchmark Kospi didn't seem to like it, with blue chips like Samsung Electronics, SK Hynix, Kakao, and Naver all falling sharply. How much do you attribute this at the BOK's decision, or is it reflective of a wider issue?
I think there's a number of things going on. When it comes to some of those blue chip stocks like Kakao and Naver, I think they're responding to some of the regulatory pressure that the government has been discussing and some of the moves going on in the National Assembly. There's a few things going on. I mean, as we've been discussing, a lot of the fairly strong growth that we've seen in the Korean economy has been the result of government stimulus. And with the possibility of tapering going ahead in the US, that might set a kind of tone where the South Korean government will come under some kind of pressure to reduce that stimulus spending, in part also because of the inflationary measures that we've been discussing. But as we all know, there's a presidential election here next year, and the current government is going to want to keep those growth figures looking good and looking promising, and stimulus could be a part of that. So it's a little bit early to say exactly how things will go over the next, the kind of near to medium term future, but the government is kind of juggling a few different priorities, and they're going to try to find a way of keeping growth going at some kind of a decent clip while managing the pandemic and while also keeping an eye on inflation. So that will be challenging, but we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, a lot of balls to keep up in the air, quite the juggling act, we might say. But we all know the markets have become rather addicted to all this free money that's been flowing around due to all these stimulus packages. But finally, we could all argue that the Federal Reserve is probably having the same, if not a bigger, effect on global markets as the pandemic right now. Firstly, do you think the Fed, as is widely expected, will announce it's going to start tapering from November? And if it does announce that's what's going to happen, what does that mean for smaller markets like South Korea's?
Well, I'm not in the prediction business. As a journalist, I like to wait and see what happens before I comment on it. But all the indications are that they will make some move toward that, and they will start prioritizing inflation in a little bit more of an assertive way than they have before. That could globally, kind of reduce the outward flow of money, and it might cause investors to maybe go bargain hunting or maybe look for stocks that are kind of undervalued or underappreciated. We refer to the just ongoing dip in the values of some of the Korean blue chip stocks that might be seen on a kind of long-term basis as a temporary blip, and it might incentivize investors to buy up those now more while there's this conversation going on. But the South Korean government, the South Korean market, the fundamentals are still strong. And even if the government does go ahead with some kind of tapering, I think we can still expect some modest to strong growth going forward.
Okay, Steven, thank you for joining us this morning. Hopefully you are correct, because my stocks have been taking a hammering over the past few weeks. But Steven, thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
All right,
Yes.
Thank you.
That was Steven Borowiec, a Seoul-based journalist on the BOK's rate freeze decision and the ongoing economic uncertainties in Korea and around the world.